Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph Pascone. I'm the host of the Turning Tides podcast. I'm coming to you today with another live video about a topic that I think needs to be addressed. As you can see behind me, I have all the animals like Noah, Sans, Ark. But today I wanted to talk about FDR and this recent trend or fad amongst some people who identify as social democrats or left of center progressives, who attempt to claim FDR as one of their own, as a progressive, as a socialist, even as a social democrat. And I wanted to make this video to dispel some of those rumors, or at least combat them. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion, but this is just mine, and this is through a close study of history. Okay, so that's what all this is going to be based in. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the historical record. It has nothing to do with me. So I want to address this in 5 major points. The first point of which is glaring and which is rarely talked about, and that is his open and avowed alliance with Southern racist Democrats, usually called Dixiecrats, who were out and out white supremacists who believed openly in white supremacy, who advocated openly for white supremacy, who stood in the way of any sort of civil rights reform in American history, and especially throughout FDR's tenure. And it's not like FDR did too much to try and combat this. He never once tried to pass an anti-lynching bill, which would, go into effect nationwide. He said very little about lynching in general, and he made a point not to talk about segregation lest he alienate the allies he so desperately needed in the southern United States. This extends to the New Deal. Almost every single New Deal policy was designed specifically not to extend to black and brown folks. That's just the reality of the situation. So that's example 1, and that's a pretty glaring oversight for people who want to call themselves progressives, unless they're leaning into the white progressives who have been openly racist throughout American and world history. But I don't think that you should. That's a pretty bad look. So, point 2 is probably the most, I'd say, infamous of FDR's policies, and it's the most obvious one when you're trying to combat the idea that FDR was some sort of socialist or humanist or anything like this. FDR interned, tens of thousands of Japanese people, Japanese Americans, who did nothing but exist. Their property was confiscated, their businesses were shut down. It in every way mirrored what occurred in Germany to Jewish people in the Holocaust, just without the extermination camps. It was in every way ethnic cleansing. That's what happened throughout the Pacific Northwest and throughout the Pacific, or throughout the western coast of America. And it's something that people who support this guy FDR need to, confront. They need to reckon with that. And plenty of them have. They've tried to wash it away. They've tried to excuse it. They tried to say it's what was necessary. I'm sorry to say, you sound like Emperor Palpatine. So if you want to sound like Emperor Palpatine, that's on you. So number 3, probably the most egregious, in my opinion, of all FDR's sins. This is not to excuse any of the stuff he's done previous. But number 3 is what he did to the island of Puerto Rico. So for those who don't know, I'm Puerto Rican. My grandmother was from Cape de Diaz, which is in the north central west highlands of the island. Um, so, first of all, during this time in Puerto Rican history, the governor for the island was appointed directly by the president. Uh, and throughout FDR's tenure, he appointed numerous people who had no idea where Puerto Rico was, who treated the population poorly, who committed outright massacres against the people. The most horrific of which was the Ponce massacre, where something like 20 plus people died and hundreds of others were wounded. Um, this was largely in response to Puerto Rican nationalism and an independence movement on the island, which had grown militant uh, since the time of U.S. annexation. Additionally, on Puerto Rico, he started something called, or remembered as, La Aparición. So, La Aparición was the forced sterilization of Puerto Rican women throughout the island. At its height, perhaps 50% of Puerto Rican women were sterilized. And, I mean, FDR said some pretty horrific things about Puerto Ricans and what needs to happen to them. He said that policies which would work were ones that Hitler would find effective, right? He was not some sort of racial progressive. He thought that the island was severely overpopulated and that what needed to happen was a literal culling. And that's what was basically installed through La Aparición. It was a subtle, slow genocide, and it's one which has affected the island to this day. So number 4 were FDR's involvement and tacit approval of things like the early Red Scare and the early Pink Scares. So the Pink Scare and the Red Scare obviously reached its height in the late 40s and 50s with Joseph McCarthy, but the two movements got their feet wet during FDR's administration, especially right before World War II. So, first of all, with the Red Scare, there was the Dies Commission, which was chaired and operated by loyal FDR Democrats from the South. They investigated labor union leaders, people with supposed communist ties, etc., etc. And they would eventually evolve into the House of Un-American Activities. In terms of the Pink Scare, FDR was responsible, first of all, in his early tenure when he was a part of Woodrow Wilson's administration, for cracking down on gay members, or supposedly gay members, of the military. Famously in Rhode Island, he had several. He invested almost $1 million of taxpayer money into discovering who was gay and kicking them out of the military. When he was commander-in-chief, he began subtly cracking down on what he considered subversive sexual elements in the military itself, and this evolved later into the Pink Scare, where civil servants were targeted for their sexual preferences and identification. So last, but definitely not least, was his indifference to the plight of workers in America. Like, of course, he passed things like New Deal legislation and reform, which were all well and good to workers and to assisting the plight of the poorest in this country. But he also showed vast apathy toward workers who chose to strike or assert their rights in any way which challenged the status quo. And I'll give you an example. And it's it's a very egregious example. Memorial Day, 1938, there was a peaceful demonstration slash picnic in which police went crazy. They started a riot and they ended up murdering 10 peaceful, unarmed demonstrators and injuring hundreds of others. In response, FDR, quoting Shakespeare, said, "A plague on both your houses," in reference to Mercutio's dying line, asserting that it was somehow the protesters' fault that they were there participating in their First Amendment right on a day which honored many of their family members who had fallen. Basically, his reasoning behind his, let's say, emotionless response had to do with his personal antagonism against the leader of the UMWA, and this butting of heads led to him gaining immense antagonism toward every single member of the Union. This was a similar set of emotions felt by his famous relative, Teddy Roosevelt, who liked unions as much as he liked union heads. Sometimes he loved unions, he wanted to join a union. Sometimes he thought unions were filled with crazy anarchists who wanted to destroy America. So all these 5 points, and I'm sure many others, can be used to showcase that FDR was in no way a socialist or even a progressive or social democrat. In my opinion, he was a liberal of the highest order. He believed in capitalism, he believed in the free market, and he reformed the free market and capitalism in order to save it from itself. He writes as much in his letters. I mean, without FDR and his New Deal policies, America very likely would have fallen into disrepair and would have ended up becoming either a nationalist or a communist country. I don't disagree that reforms were necessary in order to save the America of 1932-33. And those reforms were done and initiated by FDR. So for that, I suppose I am grateful, and for being a white passing Christian or raised Christian, I can be grateful. But should we really consider this guy our golden calf? Aren't there better examples in American history of socialists who got the job done more efficiently and without showing apathy and xenophobia toward their fellow man? I can think of several off the top of my head. Bayard Rustin, Malcolm X, Eugene Debs, the people who led the socialist movement in Wisconsin and brought things like sewer socialism into the forefront of local and state politics. There are dozens of other examples that we could be using besides pointing to the libest of libs and saying, this is our golden calf. This is the dude we're going to try and emulate. We should not be trying to emulate FDR's administration. We should not be trying to emulate any American president's administration. We should be trying to build an entirely new society from the ground up, focused on the power of the people and not on the power of some parasocial rich boy who really hated gay people and Puerto Ricans. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? What do you think about the setup? I like the animals are in here. Everyone's napping. This has never happened before. They're always barking. But yeah, Baby Yoda's still there. I got some new stuff. This is my hat. The Nanticoke Indian tribe. It's the only native uh, tribe in Delaware. Well, not the only one, but the only one with a museum. So my keffiyeh over there. That's what I think. Bye.